We start with that Daily Mail story. Starmer's far-right smear on grooming gang critics. Did the Prime Minister get his words and tone right yesterday?
He could have done it slightly better, unquestionably, but there's no doubt when Elon Musk, who is a supporter of the far right now, not just in Britain, but in Germany and other countries, and Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor's calling him a troll, say don't feed the troll. When he sets something off, and he's full of ignorance and it's lies and it's smears, anybody who gets on that bandwagon is making a mistake.
Well, the mistake he made, in my view, he said people who are calling for public inquiry, a more extensive public inquiry, or people who are expressing concern are amplifying the views of the far right. No, they're not. They're just ordinary folk. I saw some of them interviewed in Oldham yesterday on various news programmes saying they're deeply concerned. They feel white girls were systematically raped and sexually abused by men of predominantly Pakistani heritage, and they don't feel they've had proper answers and proper solutions, and they don't think there's been a proper inquiry. Now, there was an inquiry by Professor Alex J. Went on for 7 years, but it was confined to 6 areas, and there is a suggestion now that this grooming, let's be honest what it was going on, sex abuse and rape of young girls was happening was happening in up to 50 towns. It wasn't extensive enough. But
the fact there was that national inquiry was completely overlooked. The fact there were inquiries in Rotherham, Telford, Rochdale, elsewhere, and prosecutions. And yes, you're right, those girls and young women were utterly failed by the system initially, because these grooming gangs, predominantly of Pakistani heritage, were allowed to rape, abuse, intimidate, bully with impunity for too long, because there was a failure of social services, local authorities and the police to believe the girls, often from broken homes, troubled backgrounds, to believe them. Starmer, when he was the chief prosecutor, changed that. He changed how the cases were handled and said you shouldn't be disbelieving these girls, and he deserves credit for that. But instead, it's been completely twisted by Musk, who denies there was an inquiry, claims Starmer should be imprisoned and covered up when there's no evidence of a cover-up. There's incompetence everywhere. Even invented some 2008 Home Office circular claiming there should be no prosecutions when no such circular exists. And that's why this complete false picture has been painted by Musk and his far-right supporters.
Yes,
and I think that's why Badenoch and Farage should be careful when they get on that bandwagon.
The issue, Andrew, as your paper has raised, is that if you do want a new inquiry which specifically focuses on what happened with these grooming gangs. And yes, there was an inquiry by Professor Alexis J, but it was a broad inquiry into child abuse. And what a lot of people are calling for is a specific national inquiry into grooming gangs. How can people ask for that and not be lumped into this hard right bandwagon?
That's where Starmer got it completely wrong yesterday. It's a slur. It's a slur on those people, and I think he should withdraw it because... And actually, even though the Tory government did not bring in that sort of inquiry in 2022, and there was a clamour for it, Kemi Badenoch is quite entitled as leader of the opposition to have a change of view and to say there should be... Don't slur her as amplifying the fight. Why are you pulling a face head?
Because I think the thing is...
This is a really important issue in these towns. The thing is, people there feel they've been badly let down.
I know that. And Alexis J's report looked at this issue, amongst others...
In some towns.
But this is 5%. It's terrible, and it's a small part of child sex abuse. And she looked at all parts of child sex abuse, and we need to crack down on all parts of that. And that is what the report that she produced did.
The evidence
and it has recommendations.
It's continuing.
Well,
this is continuing by this community. Therefore, has the inquiry gone far enough? No. Well, it's not looking into the specific reasons.
But it's partly continuing because she made 20 recommendations. And how many were implemented?
By the last Conservative government.
Hang on, this has not been in power for 6 months. What have they done? Not enough.
11?
No, 0.
Right. None is the answer.
But we are where we are now.
But the issue is, what is the point? What is the purpose? What is the most important thing? Is the most important thing now to get on and stop this happening? Is that the most important thing?
Of course.
OK.
Why?
In that case, isn't the most important thing to act now to sort this out?
But also, we need to know why it wasn't sorted out before.
Well,
That's what you do with an inquiry.
That's what the Alexis J inquiry did. It was 7 years, and remember Boris Johnson called all those inquiries 60 million, I'll say wasted, because I think he said spaffed up the wall. That's what he said.
Right.
He was against those inquiries looking into all child sex abuse, including the gangs. Why have Musk and the far right, Tommy Robinson, Stephen Yaxley Lennon, in prison at the moment, why have they just focused on grooming gangs? The reason they just focus on grooming gangs is they want to create division and hate against a single community.
OK, but...
Pakistan in particular. No, it's important. It's important. And it's part of it. Now a rampant Islamophobia.
I know, and you said that yesterday. Yesterday, we also spoke to former police detective Maggie Oliver, who helped blow the whistle on the scandal in Rochdale. And she, talking on GB News, says, I am no far-right activist.
Right.
I am a woman who gave 16 years of my life to the police, and protecting children was the #1 priority in my life. All the victims that I know and that we support have had their lives destroyed. To write them off as far-right extremists is insulting.
But Keir Starmer
he's not doing that.
Keir Starmer didn't write them off.
No, he's not writing them all off. But I did notice Maggie Oliver didn't condemn Elon Musk for calling Jeff Phillips, the safeguarding minister, a evil witch and a rape genocide apologist, which she clearly isn't. It's a terrible smear.
I think we should
and a
take
lie,
Elon Musk out of
because
this.
She's devoted her life to fighting
well, actually,
violence
she said she
and
didn't
sexual abuse.
want to pick out individual people for
That's
criticism.
exactly what she said.
So,
Yeah.
Look, I think that this is not going away.
No, it isn't.
Andrew,
And
I'm not sure that the Prime Minister's statement yesterday helped.
Is going to make the clamour louder and greater for an inquiry, because he's feeding into the idea there's been a cover-up because of what Alexis J said in her report, that councils, police, social workers in mainly Labour-run areas turned a blind eye because of racial sensitivity. That's what she said.
Well,
we were here.
But that is true. It happened. That is true. That is true. And it was said yesterday, and it's been said many times before. It happened in Labour and Conservative areas.
What the Prime Minister said yesterday is going to feed the idea that the cover-up is continuing.
Well, we know that. Yeah, but in what sense is the cover-up continuing?
Because
who is still trying to cover things up?
Was there a cover-up?
Hang on.
Do you think Keir Starmer's trying to cover things up?
Was there a cover-up?
Can I answer the question? If abuse was taking place in 50 towns and the J inquiry referred to 6 or 7 towns, what about the other towns?
So you're saying,
count?
So you're saying,
and
unless
Oldham, remember,
you are in favour of a new
Yeah.
public inquiry, you are complicit
No, I didn't
in
say
the
that.
cover-up.
No, I didn't say that.
You did say that.
No, I didn't say that. I said there are towns that feel, what about us?
But in those towns, the police
in Oldham,
should be prosecuting.
The local council
in those
has asked
towns,
for an inquiry.
The police should be reporting,
Ed,
and the council officials should be reporting, and there was no duty upon them because that aspect of the Alexis J report wasn't implemented.
In Oldham, the council there is saying they want a big inquiry, and it's been turned down by the government.
It was turned down by the last government.
We're talking about Jess Phillips. They're talking about they don't want another inquiry. It is feeding that cover. I watch people being interviewed on the street.
It's true what you're saying,
isn't it?
No.
What was turned down then?
There was an inquiry done by Telford in Telford and in Rochdale and in
we've been through those.
Oldham
what about the other
inquiry.
43 towns?
They've had an inquiry. They've had an independent inquiry. They then asked whether the government would pay for them to have their own local inquiry, and the government, Conservative and Labour, said it's your job to hold your inquiry into your area, which they are now doing.
Right.
The idea that they've been stopped from having an inquiry or turned down by it, or turned down by Jess Phillips, rapist apologists, is just untrue.
Can I just say... we are stuck in this argument between either apparently you're hard right if you want an inquiry, or you're involved in a cover-up if you don't want an inquiry. And if I was one of those victims watching this, I think, who's taking me seriously?
That's right. You're quite right. What
on earth is going on? How have I become
You're right, because
caught in this horrific political row, which is going nowhere to investigate what happened?
And they'll be arguing their voice is still not being heard properly.
Susanna, you're right. That's why some of the victims, survivors, have condemned Elon Musk, because they realise their horrific experiences are just being politicised and used
It's
by
also
him.
why
And
it's why the survivors groups are not calling for national public inquiry.
No, they're not calling. You're
for it.
quite right.
What they actually want to do
Maggie
is
Oliver is.
Yeah, but she
She's
is not a survivors
group.
The survivors group.
It was involved in exposing the failure of the police and investigating.
We wouldn't have known
victims.
half of what had gone on if it hadn't been for Maggie Oliver.
I praise Maggie Oliver.
Yeah.
But the victims are not calling for another public inquiry, which would take years, and blight action. They're asking for action now to stop this happening.
Well, you know what's happening?
And, look, I can tell you from my experience of doing these things, if you have a public inquiry, everybody waits until the end of the public inquiry to work out are things going to change and what's going to happen. We've had a public inquiry which took 7 years and cost millions of pounds with action recommendations. And if you care about action,
do you know
you get on and act.
One of the moments which I thought really stopped the Prime Minister's tracks yesterday, and we say no to a public inquiry, no to a public inquiry, he was asked, but you just launched a public inquiry into social care, which will take 3 years. We had one of those, Ed, 20 years ago. We've had the one list inquiry.
Andrew,
we've had 5
Andrew,
more. So that's different,
Andrew,
is it?
you and
We'll
I-
have another inquiry into
Andrew-
social care, but we won't have one into the terrible
you and
abuse
I
of these
yesterday,
kids.
But you and I yesterday were sitting here, both of us saying a 3-year review
Outrageous.
will get in the way of action now.
Well, he could do-
That's
they could do it-
exactly
they could
the
do it a lot
argument.
quicker.
Another public inquiry will get in the way of action
So the Prime Minister
now.
supports a 3-year inquiry, another one into social care, but he will not support an inquiry into the shocking abuse of these children.
You know they're very
But that's an
different. You
incoherent
know
However,
they are.
right,
You know they're very
okay,
different.
stop talking.
No, it's not.
There were 20 recommendations made by Professor Alexis Jay, and the Home Secretary says that she's going to implement under a new offence this year, one of them in particular, those who cover up or fail to report child sexual abuse will face professional or criminal sanctions. So at least something is being introduced and is going to be enforced from that inquiry. Meanwhile, Elon Musk continues to tweet about it, and one individual has been charged with 3 counts of malicious communications. Messages sent between April 2024 and this month, affecting Jess Phillips, as we understand it. He is Jack Bennett's 39, charged, and the 3 victims, including the Birmingham Yardley MP, which comes after the Prime Minister suggested that threats against Jess Phillips had occurred. So, it's all thoroughly unpleasant and people getting caught up in it. And I'm not sure how much further we're getting for the victims, but hopefully those proposals made by Alexis Jay will finally be implemented. OK, let's talk about smokers and obese people are going to get sent to the back of the queue for NHS treatment. Apparently, under government plans, patients will only be given a date for an operation if they have been assessed as fit to proceed. It's called prehabilitation of patients. Now, a lot of people might go, absolutely, if you smoke or if you're obese, you should do absolutely everything that you can in order to make sure that you're fit for surgery. They're going to have to undergo a 12-week weight loss programme if you're waiting for hip and knee surgery, if you're obese. And if you're smoking, you will be urged to quit. Sensible or punitive, Andrew?
I thought, actually, particularly with the obesity, that was the case anyway. I've known people who are very overweight and they've been told, you're not fit enough to be operated on, so you're going to have to get some weight off. So that doesn't seem new at all.
I mean,
it actually seems...
The smoking one is more...
The smoking is much interesting.
But are they saying you have to give up smoking?
Because some people just can't.
But it depends what the treatment is for. Now, if you're morbidly obese and hugely overweight, an operation is a risk anyway.
Of course.
Because your heart can't take the pressure. Would you give a liver transplant to somebody who's still an alcoholic if they died from cirrhosis of the liver because of drink?
Remember?
Or a lung transplant to somebody who is still a smoker if they've destroyed their lungs? I think it's going to codify and put into a more established practice what already largely happens. I mean, consultants are having to make decisions every day.
Yeah.
So stopping smoking 4 weeks before surgery means patients have a 25% lower risk of respiratory complications. and a 30% lower risk of wound healing complications than those who continue to smoke.
So you'd certainly stop smoking if you could, wouldn't you?
Yeah. But look, if you're going in for
you aid your own recovery.
if you're going in for a knee operation and you smoke 5 cigarettes a day, I would have thought it's not going to have a huge impact. I would have thought it's the state of your health. So
how do they know if people smoke? What if people just lie? Say they don't smoke.
Yeah.
How are they going to find that? How do they prove it otherwise?
But if somebody's going in for an op,
that's what's going to happen.
And they're really engaged with the NHS, it's probably a good idea to try and get them to change their life anyway. If they're doing things that are really harming them and killing them. So look, you're going in for an op. Well, this is a better way of change your diet, a bit more exercise if you can. Don't smoke. Get off drugs if you're on them. And so on, don't abuse alcohol. It's probably all very sensible. And there is, one of the government's big shifts is going to be, we take more personal responsibility, you get more care in the community, and you harness technology. All 3 things are very, very sensible.
Noble ambition with the smoking, but good luck with it.
There was another big shift in the press conference yesterday from Keir Starmer on health, which was to say, alongside this expansion of new treatment centres to speed up elective operations, a new agreement with the private sector to use private sector capacity, private hospitals, which currently lots of people are paying to because they can't wait on the NHS, to be told that they'll get those operations free, but through a private hospital, and maybe even be able to choose that if that's more convenient. A return to how things were 15 years ago. At the time, it was controversial.
Very controversial, I remember at the time, and there's still some controversy around it. Now, if you're a patient, by and large, you just want your operation, and you don't mind where you go, whether it's NHS or private. Although I do remember Dennis Skinner, the Beast of Bolsover MP, he declined to go to a private treatment centre once and had to wait longer for his op. He did that on political grounds. I think you have to assess whether you get value for money from private treatment centres. I'd like to see the figures, because I know during COVID a lot of private hospital capacity was bought by the government, never used, and private hospitals essentially got a huge public subsidy. I want to see the sums, whether it's the way forward. If they've got capacity, I can see why you would buy it in the short term. But in the longer term, are they doing ops? Whether you say hips are quite a popular one in private treatment centres, are they doing hip ops cheaper and more efficiently to a higher standard than the NHS? If they're not, don't use them.
Interesting for the Prime Minister, who said, didn't he, in the run-up to the election, if he had a choice, whether to go to use private medicine for a member of his family, absolutely he would not. Yeah,
but if it's it was on an emergency, and if it's an emergency, you get it in the NHS anyway.
The NHS is in an emergency now. But I think it makes complete sense.
Doesn't want to know.
It makes complete sense to do it if the capacity's not being used in the private sector. Get on with it.
Of course, the very interesting thing, if you go back to 2019, when there was talk about whether there would be a free trade agreement between Britain and America. And that is now, is that back on the agenda? Could Donald Trump be interested? At the time, it was Boris Johnson who said he didn't think he could go ahead with that. And what was the reason? Because the American demand in the free trade agreement was American healthcare companies wanting to have access to providing treatment in the NHS. Is Keir Starmer opening the way for those large American companies to be able to play that role within our health service? Is this something that he discussed with his dinner with David Lammy in New York with Donald Trump a few weeks ago?
He'd be playing with fire if he did, because the closest we have to a national religion now is the NHS. But don't American healthcare companies already get involved in the NHS in sort of GP services, for instance? You always think of the GP as your friendly local doctor, but a lot of them are run by companies now.
I think my GP is run by an American company.
It's true, but at the time, Boris Johnson said no, because what the Americans were asking for was beyond what he thought the British public would be willing to agree
to. Trump is to make America great again. If he does a trade deal with Britain, it's not to make Britain great again, it's to make America great again. He will want that trade deal to swing in their favour. Since Brexit, we've signed trade deals that are advantageous to Australia and New Zealand. George Eustace, the former Environment Secretary, admitted they'll benefit their farmers at the cost of our farmers. If you go for one with America, you're in you're in big trouble. We do a lot of trade with
The
America
two
already,
American
huge
demands
amount of
are,
trade.
the two American
Do you
demands are
need an
healthcare,
agreement?
access of American companies in healthcare,
No.
and American agricultural products, beef
Chlorinated
and
chicken.
OK,
Yeah.
And
Kevin, you say that the NHS is the closest we have to a national religion. The NHS is in a total crisis. And if you go into A&E, you are quite likely, on some occasions, to not get seen very quickly, wait hours and hours and hours and hours.
that's right.
Be treated possibly in a corridor, which even doctors and nurses say you are not going to get the same treatment that you should. You might wait for a bed if you need to be admitted. It's very hard to get a GP appointment.
Ambulances.
So when are we going to make the NHS great again?
Yeah.
And why is it a problem if we purchase more capacity from the private
it
sector,
isn't.
if that means people are going to get seen? Simply saying we shouldn't, on the principle that we should stick with the NHS, as long as patients aren't paying,
That's right.
why is it an issue?
It's not an issue for me.
Free at the point of the use. It's whether in the longer term you privatise so much, you're then changing how it's going to operate, and charges might start creeping in. That's essentially it. But there's also the argument about whether it is more efficient to purchase from the private sector or deliver yourself, because that private sector is out to make a profit.
Right.
So if you're going to make a profit, they want to take money out of the NHS and put it in the pockets and the wallets and the bank accounts of the owners, the investors.
One thing you think about American
doesn't
healthcare,
happen in the NHS now.
One thing you say about American healthcare is very expensive.
But this is a pragmatic, sensible step by the government.
Yeah.
It's pragmatic and sensible. And people who are waiting desperately for an operator will be shouting, yes, at last, there's a chance.
And then if it means that
maybe-
people get moved
Yeah.
through hospitals more quickly,
Yes.
so you don't get ambulances waiting outside
hours.
hospitals, which means that ambulances can't get to patients.
But,
Something
I think
has to
Andrea,
be.
Andrea's hinting maybe there's going to be an Elon Musk tweet appearing.
What?
Saying, you know, well done, Keir Starmer,
Listen,
on his health initiative.
I am not privy to Elon
I know.
Musk's tweets.
I'm reading the runes.
I don't even follow Elon Musk's tweets.
I'm reading the runes.
Yeah. Well,
But
It's hard to avoid them anymore.
Yeah, well, true.
They're everywhere.
The private sector capacity that'll be bought will be for routine treatments.
Yeah.
It won't be for A&E,
It makes sense.
emergencies, heart transplants. Probably not if you've got cancer or whatever. Look, the private sector exists to make money. They want the easy cases.
But right now there's a crisis, and
There
it's the
is.
right thing to do to
It
purchase
is.
that capacity.
But it is. That's where people won't mind. People just want.
people just want to
their
get
own.
treated.
They do.
And that's very understandable.
Want to get
Absolutely.
treated.